what we can change and what we want to change is usually something that is happening in the future.
We talk about, your business, of course, maybe you just can give a very short intro. Who is Alisa, and what brought you here?
Yeah, a very good question that I ask myself also all the time, like, who is Alisa? So a little bit of background information to myself. So originally born in Germany in a very, let's say, non-business oriented family. So no one has studied before and no one is like an entrepreneur or something similar. But having said that, after having grown up in a tiny city called Hildesheim, I went actually to Hamburg to do my bachelor degree in a dual program study. And I did it together with British American Tobacco because back then, let's say the dream of me when I was more like 18, 19 was having this classical management career and thinking about like, oh, I want to become a top manager and I love brand marketing. So that was kind of my focus in the first years. However, after having done a little bit of experience in that area, being 23 and being very exhausted at a Friday night instead of being in an Erasmus and having a lot of fun and exploring who you actually are, what you would like to do in your life. I was just completely exhausted, tired, and was just thinking about, oh my God, all the meetings that I had on Monday. So that was the first moment where I realized this might not be actually that what I wanted to have for me and my life, and it was not the way I expected it. And I was, for the first time, a little bit surprised about my personal reactions because usually I'm a person that really is proactive, that likes to take initiatives. And whenever there are new projects and opportunities, I love to take ownership on it and maybe to make some progress. But actually, in that moment, with every new task and opportunity that came to my desk, I just felt kind of the opposite. And that was the moment where I realized, like, okay, that's not me, that's not Alisa. And so it was the moment where I said, stop. So I quit my job and I left British American Tobacco in order to do my master degree in Italy. So that's why after Germany, I really felt like I want to have not only kind of a really big break, but especially also kind of maybe a cultural shock.
Right.
Say, I wanted to have a little bit of this Bella Vita style. Um, so I was really glad that I found a very non-famous business school, university. It's Cattolica University in Milan because I didn't want to be again in a business school context because I felt like we are all a little bit the same. There's not so much diversity, and I was a little bit annoyed. I was really searching for having new stimuli in terms of new culture, new language. I was very convinced of I want to learn Italian. Um, Meeting new people, but with a different background, not everyone business oriented and studying management. And so I did a master degree, 2 years. I wanted to be a student, just a number. And so really having my time for myself. In that time, I really realized that I love wine. I love natural products. I really love entrepreneurship. And so that was the first moment where I started to think about NAMPELKA together with a friend of mine. And it was the first moment where I also got in touch with different startups because I supported some of them here in Milan. And yeah, as you can see, I'm still living in Milan. I'm still now here in Milan, in Italy. It's now 10 years since that moment that I just wanted to come here for 2 years. I also never went back to the corporate world, so never back again. Because after the master degree, I was just curious what I can do. And in the end, I thought, consulting, just in order to do it, to kind of confirm my perspective of saying, like, I don't like it. No. And luckily, there was, again, this great opportunity to do a PhD in the context of entrepreneurship in Africa. That was where, even though I have been only to South Africa, but again, more for the wine area, so not being in touch with entrepreneurs, I felt like, oh my God, that's what I want to do. So again, those two big moments in my life, the first moment in which I decided I go to Milan, it was a feeling because I really just wanted to do it without having a clear idea what's actually expecting me, which is really strange considering my background of, let's say, my family. Second moment was also in the moment of what do I next after the master degree, that I took over the idea to have this opportunity to do research in Africa. Yeah. So yeah, and then I decided to do that PhD.
That's quite a story. Yeah. Okay. So now now we can just end here. So this is Alisa. Amazing. I love especially the combination of words wine and entrepreneurship in one sentence. You put it very nicely. Cool. So then just a couple of things. So you said that you were 29 when you just decided that okay, now I just want to like take off and I want to kind of find myself, and that you don't like who you are as an Alisa. Or what was your age when it was it? I
Uh, Basically, the moment where I decided to come to Italy, it was at 23. Yes, because I had her, and then I had 1 year, and now
yeah.
I'm 10 years here in Italy. And yeah, in the end, after doing my PhD, I mean, I'm still in the area of entrepreneurship, having NAMPELKA on my side, and being also still connected to a university, which is now going back to a business school, which is ESTP Business School.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not easy. Not an easy decision.
Yeah, I bet. I bet. Wow, but that's pretty young age. I mean, I totally feel you because, I moved to Germany when I was 21, literally 2 suitcases, 1 week in a hotel, and that's it. Kind of like, okay, I'm here to continue my studies, but what's next, right? Kind of this lost kid. But yeah, it's definitely, it's not an easy path, but I think that's the most exciting, right? Like when you really decide to change your geography and then go to another country. And I'm pretty sure that Italy is very different to Germany, right? Like in all terms. So in terms of the work pace, people, culture, business, like and maybe even corporate opportunities. Although, yeah, I'm pretty sure that you never want to go back to corporate, right? But so you've been to Italy now 10 years, right? And also, as I mentioned, so I did quite a bit of stalking your LinkedIn profile, right? So you wear so many hats now. You're a researcher, you're a founder, I'd even say like an activist in a certain point, like in my eyes at least. Um, but how, coming to this entrepreneurial field, so how is Italy in terms of like entrepreneurship? And I mean, of course, wine is great, right? Gelato, pizza, and all that. But how is it like being an entrepreneur in Italy? Maybe you maybe you notice some certain patterns and what strikes you the most.
It's a very interesting question. In order to answer that, I could talk really for hours and hours, and a good aperitivo would be very helpful to open that conversation. But to kind of keep it a little bit more short, so um, there are a lot, which is really strange. So for me, being kind of inside, but still having also kind of my a little bit external perspective of what happens here in Italy around entrepreneurship and also culture speaking. So, which is striking is that Italy has a strong background and history of great entrepreneurs. Because if we look nowadays at a lot of brands in the food and beverage sector, in the fashion luxury sector, we have a lot of family firms coming from Italy. So let's say Ferrero is one example. We all do love Nutella, and it is definitely from the tiny area Piedmont close to Turin, which usually no one knows if you talk about the city. But of course, the products are known all over the world. And it has been one founder, it has been an entrepreneur. And the strange thing is, so we have this very rich history. But if we look nowadays at the numbers of new upcoming startups, scale ups, and unicorns, we are lacking so behind with respect to Germany, France, UK, and even Spain. And I'm still also personally trying to understand what are the reasons. And I don't have just one simple answer for that. I just have a couple of assumptions because it's really kind of striking me and I don't get it. So, one thing is that I believe they, in the past, were used to a different style of building up businesses because they are family oriented, and that this new, a little bit more, let's say, American style of startup scale ups with investors, VCs, and so on, and doing an exit, it's something that is not really fitting in the culture and in the values of doing business, what we usually have in Italy. Um, However, of course, there is also the trend of, okay, then we need to develop a new generation that maybe has studied abroad, that is coming back, and so on, that might be helpful. An issue, what happens really as entrepreneurs, so Italy, it's really great, has great values in terms of really history and, of course, also just like the cities and the beauty of nature. Challenges are definitely when we look at formal institutions. So if I look at the tax system, incentives, if you want to start a business, they try really hard to come up with a few things to support startups. But honestly speaking, even though I live 10 years now in Italy, the startup NAMPELKA, I don't want to do in Italy. So it's still incorporated in Germany. And in the future, because we are really about to grow, we want to do it most probably in the UK. So as much as I do love Italy and I really hope that there is a great future, there are also a lot of issues that are still there.
We had a bit of a break and internet connection issues, so we just continue. But we've been talking about how Italy tries really, really hard to stimulate entrepreneurship. Um, and yeah, but I think you just can keep please going. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, so, but that was basically also, let's say, all of the comment that in the end, one big issue is definitely kind of the formal institutional level, which is in Italy. Plus, another issue, what we definitely see, which is a big issue, is that it's not enough funding available in the Italian market. So if you look at numbers, I think Italy in the last years has been in Europe at the ranking of 12 compared to UK, France, Germany, that are, of course, in the top 5. And so the amount of funding which is available, especially for scale ups, that might be in the idea of, hey, we can maybe become unicorns, is very, very, very challenging and limited. So that's why we have a couple of stories that have been kind of in the seed phase still in Italy. So they have started here, they get the education maybe in Italy. So the funding, the fundamentals of the startup was maybe set in Italy. But then once they need to have higher tickets in the funding rounds, they're going abroad. And that is definitely something which is a big issue when it comes to, yeah, the startup scene, because I'm also doing a lot of entrepreneurial ecosystems. And of course, when you think about entrepreneurial ecosystems, what we need is kind of this recycling cycle of, we have great success stories. Entrepreneurs are doing an exit. They have a lot of knowledge, plus maybe more time, plus money, and they recycle those resources within one ecosystem. And that is kind of the fuel to get things started. If this cycle is broken because great stories in Italy are born, but are then raised abroad, it's very challenging to get those people then back to Italy. And I think at this moment, Italy, it's not really doing a great job in getting those people back. That's why it's challenging. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually had this conversation. So I connected with one female founder from Italy, and she is doing out her business here. Well, she has I think 2 or 3 masters behind her back in engineering and electronics, and she's coming from Italy. Then she moved to Sweden. She founded her team there. She also matched with an Indian co-founder. Now she traveled to Germany. Now she's setting up her company in Germany. And she told me exactly the same, like, Italy is great, but we are struggling to find capital there, like to find venture capitalists or business angel investors, because the ecosystem is just not there. Or another thing, I was quite surprised. I remember when I was in London for a tech week this summer, I didn't expect to see so many Italian startups there, to be honest. And as you said, they're maybe not like super innovative, but also their core clients, so to speak, would be very much family business, SMEs. So they still try to show that, yes, we are Italian startup, but we love to support these family businesses, and we don't really much care about, like inventing the market or creating the rocket science here. So we just not about that. Yeah, but that's quite interesting. But what about educational institutions, right? Because you are a professor, right? So that's your title, and you are doing this entrepreneurial program as, and also something called Option E that you've been in charge of at SCP Business School. How is it like in terms of this ecosystem, or like how universities actually support your entrepreneurial beginnings? For example, ESCP, yeah, Business School.
My personal entrepreneurship endeavors, or in general, how we as business schools
Your
help.
your personal, and let's say compared to, even UK, for example, how would you tell, maybe on the university side? Do you see that actually Italy really like pushing it, and they, I don't know, maybe set up different programs internally inside institutions, inside universities? How are things going on that side?
Yeah. So, in generally speaking, for the ESCP, for instance, I think we do try to push on each campus, so in each country in which we are, at a very similar level. I don't see that, for instance, Italy is pushing more. What is interesting in a way, so yes, I'm in charge of this specialization in impact entrepreneurship, which is really nice. But
Mhm.
however, for instance, we are, of course, also still very much at the beginning. So it's also internally that we need to spread the word, and students need to know that there is a great specialization, so they apply for it. However, what is interesting is, as Italy and especially Turin is not that famous maybe for fancy startup scene and great entrepreneurs, it's actually challenging to get especially international students to take a program in Italy due to the current reputation. Of course, we do have a campus in Berlin, we do have the campus in London, and even Paris. Let's say those three cities are more appealing when it comes to entrepreneurship, which is less driven by what we do as programs and education to support, but it's more driven by the general, let's say, idea that we have from those ecosystems and how it is presented, let's say, in the media and what's going on. Um, so I think education in general plays an important role for entrepreneurs, but actually also up to a certain point, because the biggest challenge usually, and it doesn't matter so much at which stage, meaning like at which level or which type of program, bachelor, master level, executive education, in most of the cases, the biggest issue is to actually get them into action, get them into trying things, doing things in a way that even though there is no clear structure, even though you have not yet a specific plan, and you cannot have at a very early stage, because it is uncertain, to still get them doing things and to get them into the flow of, let's say, trying to build up something from scratch. And so that's why it's a completely different style of teaching and helping students when it comes to entrepreneurship compared to, let's say, very, very stereotype comparison such as investment banking or corporate finance.
100%. Yeah, it's very much hands-on approach, right? When you try to teach entrepreneurship. Yeah. But then,
Yeah,
yeah,
sorry,
sorry.
it's not easy because it's all about the very early stage. And that's also, now I don't want to be too theoretically driven, but that's also a lot of my research is more on this very initial stage. And it's pretty much connected to your identity and the role that you have. So if I have students in front of me, we are on campus and they are in the role of students, their feeling and their perspective is, my duty, my role here is to be behind my laptop, to make notes, make maybe questions, but then prepare for an exam. If now I come inside that classroom and before in the morning that corporate finance in which they needed to do that role, then I'm coming in and saying like, forget about everything. Now you need to do things. And if you're not doing things, I cannot help you, because I can just help you once you get into action in a way.
Yeah.
It's challenging. It's challenging. That's why a lot of our programs, for instance, also the specialization in impact entrepreneurship, we try to get them as much as possible out of the classroom. But because this classroom, in a way, is kind of in an automatic and very natural way, giving them the idea of your duty is just to sit there and to be a little bit, let's say, passive, just like someone who consumes, but not someone who creates.
Yeah.
But entrepreneurship is about creating.
Yeah, it's also about engaging. Yeah, but you definitely got the point there. Yeah. But you said the words impact, right? But how, and also you said two things. So the word impact, and then you also said that you try to take students as much out of the class. So do you like visit companies, or is it just, you go in the field, or depend on the industry you're like looking into? So how does that work? What do you mean by taken out of the class? So what do you do with students?
Yeah, different things. So we try to connect them with the local ecosystem. So try to get them to accelerators. For instance, in Turin, we do have Techstars, we do have Plug and Play. And so connecting them with the reality, being there, seeing how the situation, how, yeah, even what they just do simply. In some cases, it might be interesting to also talk to some corporates because they also do have kind of this idea of an entrepreneurial mindset, even in a corporate world. Of course, we try to connect them with startups and entrepreneurs to visit them. Um, at the same time, what we also do is a completely ecosystem trip in which we travel and we go into, in our case, to Catania, because Catania is a flourishing, not yet well developed ecosystem for entrepreneurs. And so it's interesting to understand what are challenges and barriers
Mm-hmm.
to build up a flourishing and supportive entrepreneurial ecosystem, but also what are the first things that you need to do or what is needed at the governmental level, but also at individual levels in order to get things started. And so we also have that component to give them kind of the idea of what are the different components of an entrepreneurial ecosystem and how you can build it up.
Amazing. And what's the turnover? Let's say, people or like students, right? They go into this program, and what do you see as the outcome? So, like, the real entrepreneurs who come out of this program, what's maybe percentage of students who then decide, okay, now I'm building my next venture?
Yeah. It would be amazing to have like a specific percentage. It's not that easy to come up with one. And the reason for that is so the students, when they finish that specialization, most of them are still in the process to do another year of their master degree. So in their mind is more the fact of what is the next campus that I go to? I need to move. I need to find an apartment. I need to find an internship. I need to write my thesis. So there are a bunch of other really important topics for them that just in terms of the timing, they have priority because they need to get their graduation. And so that is why the percentage of students at this specific specialization that immediately turn into entrepreneurs is rather low. However, all of them are curious about the world around startups. So most of them start by working in VCs, start by working in accelerators. So they are still connected to the startup world. Plus, usually after 7, 8, 9, 10 years, they actually build up their own businesses, but also with a bigger personal network and a bigger pool of rich experience. That is why, and of course, we in Turin, we just have our third year of the specialization. I cannot give you that number because we don't have so much history.
Oh, but that sounds amazing, because I'm the part of the ecosystem in Frankfurt, and like the entrepreneurship center where I'm working at. It's also quite young, but I see that, as you said, right? It's not like necessarily about, okay, actually people approach us and then the next day they register their company. Okay, now I'm a startup. No, it's also about just giving them idea, or like sensing the tastes, with them together, get that this is the ecosystem, that's what you can do, this is your next step, just grow your network, especially I think at ESCP Red Business School. So the count of people you get exposed to daily, it's quite impressive. I have no doubts in that. And then, at the end of the day, so maybe like 5 years down the road, the students who one day came into your class, right, they will create that impact to Italian economy or to German economy or somewhere else in the world. But how do you define the word impact, by the way? I'm curious.
Yeah, I usually also try as much as possible to kind of avoid that term because it can mean a lot, everything, and nothing at the same time. So in my case, personally, impact and why I believe it's important to give that touch to the idea of entrepreneurship is that my aim is that the students, the individuals are intentional about which type of startup with which product and or service they would like to offer, in the way that they're very conscious about what are then the consequences that they create in a way. So apart from, of course, creating revenues. So what I would like to see is, when it comes to impact, is that in the end, we are very intentional about what are the consequences that our actions have. And we see on a long-term perspective which change those actions and our intentions can create. And the word impact for me then, of course, is always with the aim of having as much as possible a positive change and the change we would like to see. That's why we need intention, while at the same time reducing as much as possible, of course, the negative ones. And all of this, of course, we want to do by making money. So being sustainable also in an economic way. So creating revenues that are able to cover all our expenses.
Mm-hmm.
That's the impact.
Amazing. Great. I love that. But what about your personal impact, right? Because uh, as we mentioned, so you're a researcher, you're a professor, but you also a founder, right, of your own project or business. I don't know, because some people also like they name it differently, right? Some people even get offended that you call it business because, oh no, it's not only about money. Why do you call it business? But what about NAMPELKA? What's your impact with NAMPELKA? And maybe just tell us about what you do there. Um,
It's very much connected to the idea of impact, because adding on that, me personally, with all the different activities that I have, is that in the end, what I really like is to create and leave an let's say, to change the life of a person with the, let's say, interaction that we have. So in the way, the reason why I'm still in a business school and while I teach is I do not teach so much because I love to speak. It's not so much because I just be in love with the topics that I teach. It's more because what is really nice and what thrives me is the fact that to see that through a session, through a connection that I was able to create, there is a change in the life and the pathway of the student. And that is what I really like. And that is my personal goal on the, let's say, teaching side. The same is actually also with research. In a way, I still believe that research also, if we are able to actually, let's say, communicate what we do in theory, has a change for the people that are reading and or actually doing it, because it helps you to then be ready to teach. And the same thing is also for NAMPELKA. So in the end, what we do with NAMPELKA, as my research is connected to all the stuff that is going on in emerging markets, more precisely in Africa, since 2015, I'm able or had the chance, the honor to travel to especially Nairobi. And so I have met on my own a lot of great female entrepreneurs. And personally, my experience was that I learned so much from them or through them. They have opened my eyes to a few things. They were helping me to kind of understand that uncertainty is fine. Again, I was not really raised in an environment in which uncertainty played a big role, so I'm not really used to it. And accepting why doing a PhD, because academic career is with usually a lot of uncertainty, and doing a startup is a lot of uncertainty. They helped me a lot in my personal progress. And so since then, I really felt like, okay, that has helped me personally so much. And again, they were able to have that impact, that change, that influence on my life. I was really, and I'm still really motivated and convinced that I would like to replicate my personal experience for more people. And that is exactly what we want to do with NAMPELKA. So in NAMPELKA, we create matches, connections, and relationships between people that usually never ever would meet because they are coming from a completely different cultural context. For example, we are matching someone coming from Kenya with someone coming from Hamburg, Frankfurt, Milan, or something like that. Who do we match? So in the end, again, with the aim of creating impact, supporting also sustainable development, the idea is that we have one person in that match, which is called grower. And in that case, for this moment, it's a female entrepreneur coming from an emerging market. And due to that case, we have a startup on her side. And we all know that if you have a startup, you have a lot of challenges. We identify one specific challenge, and based on that challenge, we as NAMPELKA, we translate it into which competences do we need to have in order to be able to solve that challenge. And that information is our starting point to identify which is the other person that would be interesting in that match. And that other person is called enabler. And the enabler is an international expert having specific competences. And so we are searching for the competences that are fitting perfectly with the need to solve the challenge. So that's why we are creating the matches between grower and enabler, coming from a completely different cultural background, having something in common, because if you don't have anything in common, you cannot create a relationship. It's a relationship for 6 months. It's a 6-month learning journey together. And the main goal that they share together is solving the challenge of the grower. And by doing that, both of them are learning. And that is why it is pretty much connected to my personal motivation to create an influence and impact on the people's life by making connections, by making them learn. Because most of the time they get so much out of it that after that, their life is not completely the same as before. And in this way, we are also closing the gap between emerging markets and developed markets, because usually we are not only at a very big distance in terms of kilometers and physical distance, but also in terms of hierarchy and power distance, because we do have the scenario that usually someone coming from emerging markets, it's pretty much in the mindset of, I need to get something out of a person that is coming from a developed market. And this is very not balanced, but in our case, it's the opposite. It's a balanced way of peer-to-peer giving and taking.
Yeah, so it's like a very much learning journey together. Okay, we have an issue, we tackle it together, we share the best practices, and then whatever will come out of this connection, then great for both of us. But how do you actually measure, so this, let's say, the success of NAMPELKA, right? So is it like the count of maybe resolved challenges together, or is it the number of founders, female founders you could connect to the platform, or do you have any sort of like metric that you keep in mind?
Okay, so there are different levels. There is a level of measuring, let's say, the performance and the learning of each charma, which is our connection, so of each match. In that case, we usually measure it by the fact of how much they have learned, because we do an initial assessment for both, also at the personal level. And we do then, after 6 months, the moment of harvesting to see, like, you started here and where did you come? So it's kind of keeping track and measuring this learning curve, which for us, and there is coming kind of inside my research background, of course, while growing NAMPELKA, we are then hopefully able to establish different patterns and categories of what are usually the 4, 5, 6 learning categories that we usually see. But this is something we need to first develop the data. And let's say we are doing that by creating more and more matches. However, at a higher level, as you mentioned, the impact that we can measure with NAMPELKA, it's a very good question. We have not yet done it just because we are not at that stage that we have such a history. Because if we want to measure impact at a more macro level, you usually have the thing that what we can change and what we want to change is usually something that is happening in the future. It's kind of a long-term perspective. That is also why it's an issue about convincing investors, because usually whenever you create something with an impact, the impact is amazing, but you will see the outcome out of it maybe in 3, 4, 5, 6 years. So it's not short-term oriented. You need to have a long breath. However, of course, we want to measure it. It's not that easy and open for ideas from everyone. We're always open for new ideas and thoughts. Is we cannot only use what is usually taken from NGOs, education programs to say, okay, our entrepreneurs have hired more employees. Our entrepreneurs have increased the revenues over the years, which is true. But in our case, we are more at an individual and human-based perspective. And most of the ideas, even though they're already in place, they do revenues, they do sell some of their products, they are sometimes not that strong. So we believe that in some cases, we might even be the reason why they stop what they do. But then they're able to build something new, which makes finally sense.
Right.
If that's the case, if our assumption is right, then it's very difficult to take the KPIs, such as how many employees you have hired on top. If then our KPI would be, if we ask for a survey, they would answer, no, I closed that business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's bad maybe all the time if they close their business. So that is why I think our KPIs, even at the long-term perspective, will be more regarding this learning moment. So really kind of having more and more KPIs for highlighting really that person at an individual level. But then, of course, at the long-term perspective, maybe being able to, okay, that person, we believe it's a multiplicator that can create more impact at the lower level. So hiring, training others. But in that case, we need to see with a few examples in the future what might be the right indicators to choose that might be applicable for us. Let's see. We will do that, but it's not yet, let's say, really clear. It might be the way and really kind of, because otherwise you start collecting some numbers, as we usually do a lot in the, let's say, scholar and academic world, but sometimes it also don't really make sense. So then it's just like a waste of time.
Yeah, no, actually, I totally agree with that. And I also was asking this question because, I was just like curious to hear your answer, because I feel like that would be actually to, indicate the very certain KPIs. Okay, we have to onboard this kind of people, like we have to create this kind of success stories that could probably also contradict to the whole concept of NAMPELKA, right? Because before we've been talking about it a bit, and you said like, yeah, it's not really about, generating like revenue or something sort of about money, but it's really about fostering that ecosystem, like connecting this beautiful female founders, together. And like, as you've said, right, create this impact in a very long run. But then also another side of this thing. So I wanted to ask you how actually the ecosystem is looking for, let's say, projects or startups like yours, right? Because we know that there are quite, I'd say, a number of communities, like we have, for example, Albright, or this programs like The Break, for example, if you go to Spain, right? And all they really try to support these female founders, but not necessarily they're like, raising big funds, although, Albright, they did, so they did it quite well. But for example, this ventures like yours, right, who are like tackling emerging markets of South Africa, because also from VC's perspective, I see that they actually now kind of shift their point, and they look and they see quite a big potential now in South Africa. They say, it'll also be like multiplied in a couple of years from now, in terms of the economical turnover. But what do you think for communities and for businesses, right? I will use the word business like yours. Is there like is it something that we really have to look at the future? Is it something that we should really like put our focus towards? And really foster that and create more communities, more business models like yours who connect, maybe like people and founders from emerging markets like in South Africa, for example? Or is it just, something that we see now and no, that we should be really looking like very locally and do the business, not cross-border, but let's say focus on Germany or Italy only or somewhere else in the world?
Very, very good question. So in a way, by default, and I might be biased also due to my, let's say, personal background and story about traveling quite a lot and connecting with a lot of different countries and having, a lot of things going on in a lot of different countries and not only one. Um, I strongly believe that there is a relevance in connecting at a global scale and connecting different communities. Also, because I, in general, believe that peer to peer learning works a lot, especially when it's customized in a way that it's really fitting the needs of both, which is not that easy, but it's then in case something very smart and efficient because we all do not have a lot of time. Um, but we also need to be very careful in how we create those relationships. And I think what we do not have so much, it's actually to have this honest connection and relationship between different countries. So sometimes I just feel like, because if we think about networking, and again, there's a lot of theory that is also kind of stressing that part, we are usually driven by similarities. So we look at someone who's similar, might be due to different factors, might be because they're coming from a similar hometown, they're speaking a similar language. And already in that part, if we think about a similar language, if we just take Spanish, we can connect different countries from a completely different area, such as Spain and, I don't know, let's say Mexico, whatsoever, or Argentina, and they're coming from a different background, but in the end, there's still Spanish and they can speak the same language. So in a way, it makes sense. So, and I think those things in which there's still a strong part of similarity, that is maybe at this moment kind of the majority of relationships and business models that we can see. But it's not really creating equal access to it because it's just continuing with some priorities that are driven due to historical backgrounds. And so if we really want to kind of be open-minded in a way and giving that, let's say, equal access to someone, I think it's necessary to kind of break through those networks that are only kind of easily to generate because they do have something in common from the past. And so it's just the easiest to do at the first place. I don't know if I've been clear.
Yeah, 100%.
So that's what I believe. And I think in the future we have a lot, because in the end, especially if I don't want to become philosophical, but we are living in one planet and we have only one not unique, but shared pool of natural resources. And we do know that we have an issue because we are using too much of our resources, of our natural resources. So in the end, we also know when it comes to those consequences that we already feel when it comes to the issues of what happens with the global increase of warming and so on, that we're sitting in the same boat. So that's why the belief of also NAMPELKA to say like it's peer-to-peer, we're at the same level, and breaking through the fact that there is a power relationship between and distance between different countries, which not only at the political level, but also then at individual level, how people approach each other. I think it's something that is not anymore updated because there are too many topics that are global and that affect every one of us. And so for me, it doesn't really make sense to make a big difference out of it. And I think having this change also in our way of thinking and how we approach different cultures is definitely important. And one last thing why I'm saying that is, again, with my experience in universities and teaching a lot of students coming from different countries, it's so funny, but since how many years? 5 years, I'm kind of teaching. Every time, first day, you see a group of Spanish-speaking people, French-speaking people. What else? Then, of course, some Asian countries. Then they usually have, if we have minor groups of coming people, only one or two out of a specific country, such as maybe Netherlands, usually might not be so many. Then we have kind of a mixed group of the ones that just have no one else from the same country. And it's just like, but in this way, we are not international. And in this way, we are not creating those equal and open, I don't know, interconnections between different countries. We don't. So that's why, for instance, some of the things we try to say, like, oh, we are all more connected, I truly doubt that this is actually going in the direction we initially have, such as Erasmus things, because in most of the ways, they're sticking in a pretty much way, and they're not adapting to the local cultural elements, because they still go to some of the things they have seen in their hometown or whatever. They're doing more tourism than actually deep diving in the culture. But if we want to be able to be inclusive with different cultures, you need to deep dive. And I think that's not what we prepare, especially students, even if they do international exchanges. So yes, there is a need for those business models, I think, in the future.
Great, but just a small thing on the students level. I think it also very comes. I mean, it could be like a full-fledged, conversation about that, but I think it also comes from that point of view. What are you coming for to the country? Of your travel, of like your final destination. If you're coming, let's say I'm coming from Russia, right? And I told myself from day zero that okay, I'm coming to Germany, and I will deliberately avoid any Russian-speaking communities because, otherwise I won't learn the language, right? I will be then it just definitely not even worth it to cross the borders, to go that far from my family and then speak the same language, do the same thing, right? So I think it's also like a very personal touch to that if we talk on the personal level, right? And like not the business model things. But some people, they do the opposite and they feel, no, why would I go out of my comfort zone, right? So if I can speak my home language, even 4,000 kilometers away from my hometown, so they just like, okay, I will still keep vibing with, let's say, that Hispanic group or with that Slavic group or like, Asian community, right? So I think it's very much coming from the personal level, like what the person is really looking for. But on the same topic, I wanted to ask you one question related to, the South African side of your story. But maybe you can share what was like the most striking thing about South Africa, like that something that we do not think in Europe about, in terms of maybe like business or even some personal touch to it.
There are, in general, there are just so many differences. I think one at a very, maybe also kind of more obvious level is not only South Africa, but also Kenya, where I've been a lot of times, is that despite all the challenges that you can just simply see with your eyes, being around 10 minutes maybe in a city or at the countryside, a million of problems that are worth to be solved. And one could assume they, in general, on average, might get then, due to the scarce resources available and the severe problems that they face, that people, communities might become very selfish and centric on, I want to make my life better. But what is striking is that it's kind of the opposite. It's very strong, the identity with the community, the family, the kinship, where you come from, also in terms of really the earth, like the soil, the region where you come from, which is very beautiful to see. They feel a natural duty and responsibility to give something back to their community. And this idea of community and kinship, it's not only blood related in a very close sense, meaning like father, mother, brother, sister, maybe aunt, maybe cousin. No, it's kind of more extensive. And I think this is something that at least coming from Germany, knowing Italy, working also in the UK and so on, I have not perceived that much here in Europe. And this is kind of striking to see that value of community, which is also coming from this idea of Ubuntu, which is kind of maybe going around. It's kind of exactly just the term to kind of identify that kind of most of the African countries and culture has this connection to the community and this putting the humans at a very central level, which I think we kind of lost in the European area, like putting us as human beings kind of really in the center and our needs as a human being. Not only because we want to maximize profit, we want to maximize our salary, we want to maximize, I don't know, our consumption. Those are all external, very material driven elements and not human elements. So that is one thing. A second is the whole topic about leapfrogging. So you might have heard about it. It's basically just that idea to jump over one generation of technology. So all the digital stuff in the whole country is just kind of getting crazy. And it's just amazing to see how easy also for them at, again, a society level is the adoption and the application that users are actually using it. So for instance, we know that, I don't know, having the fixed telephone, I don't know, back home or even fax, whatever. I mean, it has been all over the place, and it has been definitely also kind of an infrastructure issue because you need to set the lines. It has never really taken place in Africa. If you look South Africa, in some areas due to the history, it has been a little bit more common. If you go already to Kenya, crazy. If you had one, it was extremely expensive and not really working. If you now look at what is the coverage rate of people having a mobile phone, maybe not a smartphone, but a mobile phone and having internet on it, it's crazy. It's like, I think in Kenya, it's around 80%, 85% coverage. And so if then you are able to kind of know that it's not a smartphone, so maybe you cannot use some services as apps, but mobile payments through the SIM card, such as M-Pesa, the case of Kenya, then you're really able to kind of jump directly into mobile payment connected to your mobile number. So coming from the telephone providers area, doing a service that is more known as a banking service, they have leapfrogged basically a big bunch of what we have in terms of our responsibilities and our burden in a way from the banking industry that we have in Europe. So in some ways, what I believe is super interesting is to see that as they have missed kind of some of our development that we have done here, I think as we now realize, especially in Europe, in the Western world, that what we have built up, it's not sustainable. Burden for us to kind of get back, change it, and putting it kind of to the next stage, which might be more digital, more sustainable, more green, and so on. Whereas in Africa, as you still have also a lot of weaknesses, they were never ever able to kind of build up that infrastructure before. They don't care about it, so it might be even easier, less burden to jump to the next stage. At the digital level, in terms of fintech, you see that it's actually working. There are a lot of great startups, amazing. At the level of smart city building, mobility, I'm always shocked because they are just replicating what we have done in the 80s, 90s. And I'm feeling like, why do you do that? Why you still buy just all the lanes only for cars if we know that in big cities, the car won't be the future? Like, why is it not possible that a Nairobi or a Johannesburg is kind of immediately pushing a lot on public transportation? They don't. Of course, they also have additional issues because of safety, security, and all that stuff. But this is a topic where I believe it's kind of a pity because you don't see such a, let's say, more developed or more innovative area. But again, if we have smart people coming from wherever, which country they want, going in those areas, I think it's a very interesting. I don't don't take me like as it sounds mean, but it's like a nice playground for someone who loves to think out of the box. And
Yeah.
I think we can do that more than in the European countries.
Mm. No, I totally get what you're saying, because I remember when I was at like one startups events, big conferences, there was a lady. I think she's originally from either Nairobi or Kenya. I'm terribly at remembering that very gritty details, but she was the founder of I Am the Code movement. Maybe you know that, but it's coming from South Africa. And this lady, what she developed this, first it was like literally a camp of girls who was sitting there like coding. And then from like a small group, it developed into this whole ecosystem, and then the European came on board, and then they got like some good investments from also some developed countries in Europe. And now it's the whole movement. But the way she was speaking about that, I swear to God, I was like on the edge to let my tears out, because she was talking exactly as you've said, like this belonging of community. She was not talking about those girls as they just like some random girls she knows who sit and go there, but she was talking about them like as if they're daughters, to this lady who was on the panel. And I was just so amazed by that, because that's not also something that you really usually see in Europe, when like really big C-suite level talk about their business or their startups. And I was just amazed by that, to be honest, like thrilled that such people, exist. And I said that was also like a very turning point for me, that I realized, apparently, there are like some cool stuff happening in South Africa. And also maybe another example, Francisca, who is the founder of Uncap, she's like also working on that side of business. And I would never thought that, like a lady from Frankfurt, right? She did her studies, then she went into corporate, would look into that part of the world, and then also, develop like a startup with a focus to back up founders there. So that's I think that's just amazing movement that we see all across, like also with you and NAMPELKA. That's another beautiful thing, right? And that's also quite a, I'd say, even groundbreaking for me, because you really do it cross border, right? Like Germany, South Africa. That's also quite a drastic I'd say difference in terms of even geography, cultural background, and just everything. Amazing. And but I also wanted to ask you. So we've been talking a bit like about research and about you as a founder and your experience with students. But I'm curious, do you think that entrepreneurship, it's actually something that you can teach people? Or is it something that you've just been born with as your instinct?
Definitely, you're not born with it, or it might not be the only way. So, and luckily, also from the research side, we kind of got over that time in which we believe, even as scholars, that there are specific characteristics, personal traits that identify an entrepreneur from a non-entrepreneur. We left that storytelling. Having said that, it does not mean that there are not at all some characteristics that might be helpful if you are an entrepreneur. They are, of course, such as maybe being ambitious, curious, and all those elements might be, of course, very, very, and resilient, of course, might be very helpful. However, in the end, entrepreneurship is a flow of activities. It's a process. And unfortunately, it's a process that might be or is usually also very different from like comparing one case to the other. So it is very challenging to come up with kind of this roadmap of this is how the process looks like. We have a lot of examples that we try to do it. There are good things that can help you. But what really helps is in the end doing it. And that's why the focus in general is a lot also on serial entrepreneurs. So individuals that are doing one startup, one business after the other, doing it again and again. because it's a learning process in which you learn a certain, but a mix of kind of hard skills and soft skills both together, that the more you do it, the better you get actually at doing it. So that's why, yes, in a way you can teach it. But again, it's not one theory that you can teach to students or participants. And just because they have understood the theory, it does not mean they're actually good at then also doing and applying it. Um, Different, because the teaching part is more of helping them to get as fast as possible into action in order to learn and to be very efficient in then learning and testing something new, which is the classic idea of a lean startup, which is very simple, but it's something that helps a guidance. And in order to get them doing this circle, there are a lot of different things you can help students, participants, entrepreneurs, that they can learn it. So in the end, yes, I do believe we can teach it in a way, but it's, as I said also before, it's a different way of teaching. It's less theory. It is more being continuously on their side to help them to follow different steps in the application, and helping them to, whenever it's needed, to go back to maybe some theory or some other methods that can help at different stages in the process.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, well said. I guess well said, because I also stand for this idea that yes, you can teach maybe like some basics, right? But it's just you have to do your thing. So and that's also what we see with this founders who approach us, for example, right, daily. They're like, oh yeah, I have this idea. And then when we talk with them, and then they can tell us, yeah, I did this course, this course, this course, and then 1 month later they never show up, and then you're like, okay, so what can I do here then? Right? Amazing. But
Just to add on that, I think, and it's something we do not do at this moment, I think in most of the business schools, the different programs, because more or less we always say everyone is doing something different, but I don't think so. Um, I believe we need to find something that is helping a lot more on this first stage of mindset, identity, because a lot of things then in the process are helping. Because what you just said, it's also a thing about what's your mindset on it, like just not showing up or not being in the, not feeling, not behaving in the way that you are actually getting out of a program something, only because again you're more in the passive role. That's not an entrepreneur, and they can go through the best schools, the best programs, and they can have the best idea. They won't be able to make it. They won't. And so that's why I think it's yeah, it's very challenging. It's challenging, but there needs to be also a strong personal motivation.
100%, 100%. But let's say if imagine someone called Jenny, let's make up a character. So she comes up to you and she approaches you and tell you, hey, Alisa, I have this idea, right? I really feel like I want to make this business, whatever, XYZ. So could you maybe recommend me a couple of universities, or just could you maybe just like an outline for me, a really manual step-by-step how to become an entrepreneur? What do you say? What would you say to Jenny? So, okay, Jenny, now you go to university, then you approach a community, then you maybe, start your own venture, or forget about university, jump on a venture, try to just to build things. So what would you tell to Jenny?
So I would tell Jenny, first of all, be ready to give it a lot of time and patience. So my suggestion would be, come up with a clear idea about what's the reason why you want to build up a business, and the why needs to be very clear to you, because it gives you a direction to understand what might be a first interesting group, community, place, location to get to and to get connected. And so first step is understanding why you actually want to do what you want to do. from that, translating it into, okay, what are then interesting people that I can talk to? Getting closer to people that are doing something in that area, in that why that you want to get into, because it might be completely different. So getting closer to those and just getting step by step in a way started without saying, I just participate in a program and then after that, I believe I'm ready. Or I'm personally also not really convinced of doing some incubation programs or accelerators because that might be helpful. I'm not saying that they're not being helpful. I just believe they might not be the most efficient way because they're also asking you a lot of time at the beginning. So most of the times, if we want to do those programs, they want to see you full time dedicated to it. And then the first dilemma starts because then it means, okay, should I leave my job? Should I jump 100% on that part? But then you have this big pressure on your shoulders to earn very fast some money to cover your salary. And I think that's the main killer ever, 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 because it increases mental issues because you're feeling stressed and exhausted. You might, due to that stress and pressure, come up with decisions that are not actually helpful for the business because they are short-term oriented and again, not long-term oriented. So my suggestion is do it step by step, gradually, but most importantly, getting closer to the people that can be rich contributions to what you actually want to do. In other ways, it's also thinking about your own job. So one example in the case of me and my partner helping at NAMPELKA, Lara, is we are both having also kind of full-time jobs at the same time, but they're both, while we are getting paid for doing it, we are both also at the same time creating a value for NAMPELKA. So in my case, I have the research in Africa. I have a lot of connections. I can travel to Africa because I need to do research. I have research projects that are connected to the women that we have in our cohorts. So I even have better access to data. They also know me better. So even the data is more rich. So it is the best weapon to also ensure that I have a rich and great research output. And so I can become, and those people help me, of course, also to have guest speakers in class, create more connections to students. So it has a big value, but I'm doing it because my job is already also helping me and preparing me for NAMPELKA. So I create synergy effects. In the case of Lara, as she is more into business model design, consulting, and so on, she's actually working in a startup and doing exactly this, let's say, management of the different guys, also the tech guys, in order to develop the digital product. And so she already does all the experience once, get paid for it, learning how to do it. And then if we are ready with NAMPELKA, she has already more experience and can do it faster. But at the same time, we can organize our time because she is a freelancer. I'm working in a university. We do have our space of freedom in which we still can dedicate time to NAMPELKA, but it's not the 100% issue. And this is another step where I'm saying, like, if you go into incubators and accelerators, you can do it. Especially, I think it's good for someone or for that person, Jenny, if that person has no contacts at all and she really needs to kind of get somewhere started. But again, my suggestion is if that's the issue, instead of doing 100% an accelerator and maybe just getting freaked out because you also left your consulting job, because it's not easy to combine that. In that case, my suggestion for Jenny, take it slow, do it step by step, find step by step the right people. And then you also see what might be something in terms of where I earn money that can create and prepare myself for building up sooner or later the startup. And then the moment will come where you can jump 100% on it. If Jenny is a person that is still a student and picking up universities, in that case, it's different because you have a different scenario. You don't need to work. Your full time is being a student. And of course, in that case, my suggestion would be for Jenny, there are different universities that do have maybe a specific focus on entrepreneurship. Then in that case, my suggestion is pick the universities wisely. and the one where you already do your specific degree, but at the same time, you can take courses into entrepreneurship. So again, you are a student, but you at the same time get also already prepared for becoming sooner or later an entrepreneur.
Yeah. And also get exposed to the right network, right? Probably like venture capitalists, business angels, or just experts, coaches, mentors, whoever, or already existing co-founders and founders. But
Exactly.
yeah, but for you, it works just perfectly, right? Because I feel like so your full time basically funnels your expertise or like also network, and exposure to new people, research opportunities for NAMPELKA. So that's just I think the best case scenario. It's a win-win on both ends, I suppose. So
It
that's
is, because kind of both sides are enriching each other. It's kind of like a vicious
like
circle, but
that.
positive.
Yeah, 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 100%.
But also to say, like, it was not that easy to come to that point. Now I'm step by step getting to benefit out of it, but there have been years, and especially like right after my PhD, in which you are pretty much at the start with your career in research. You don't know exactly if you go exactly in that direction. You teach other courses that might not be really customized to your expertise, also because you still need to develop your expertise. In Belka was kind of a big question mark, what exactly we can do. So in that, there were years in which it was kind of the feeling of, oh my God, I have 3 different areas that are asking my time. I cannot go on always like that. But again, if you know your why, in a way, you will come to that point where they are then kind of all interrelated and connected to each other. Just to say that it sounds very easy, it's not like that, because especially you start from scratch and it's usually already quite demanding to do one thing with a lot of uncertainty. If you have like 3 or 4 out of it, it's a little bit challenging, but that's again where you need to have your resilience as an entrepreneur. And I think I learned this part a lot, at least for 2 years.
Yeah.
Oh,
So know your why, number one thing. Be consistent, be true to yourself, and be patient, I guess, right? And also connect with the right people. So that's also quite an important thing, because I feel like if you want to become a founder, co-founder, at the end of the day, it's people business, right? So it all comes out of people. You never know who is going to be your next connection, what you will make out of it. But a bit like, since we come into an end, I wanted to ask you closing question. So about people and communities. So maybe for any Italian founders, or just someone who, or for that journey, right? So could you maybe just like recommend a couple of communities, local communities in Italy, or maybe like organizations or something who are supporting female founders, or maybe Europe-wise, that comes up to your mind? Because on your LinkedIn, I think I saw something called Sisters Founders. Yeah, that was one thing, but maybe something else that comes up to your mind, and you could tell us.
of course. So it would be nice if I would have a lot of those communities in my mind as examples and also participating in them. I don't have. And I think the reason why I don't have it so much is actually because mm, what we do, or what connected to my why, only if you know in a way your why and what is kind of the direction, you also can filter better the people with whom you would like to talk and you would like to be connected. And it is not easy to then have those people that you truly can trust, that have an enriching value, connection, expertise that can help you in your future in building up your startup. So that's why it's very challenging to just say, I go to one community and then I would find them there. So in my personal case, so far has been due to the different activities that I do. And for instance, especially ESCP is helping a lot, because due to the teaching and management tasks that I have, you just meet so many different people. So it's very nice to do like kind of this cherry picking in a way. That has been so far my type. And then I'm kind of a little bit more sometimes with NAMPELKA or me personally, the one who's then the connector to connect the ones that I have kind of picked very consciously out of the people that I meet. Because so far there are a few communities that you can go to. And I know, especially if you are starting and you might not have a job, a daily job that helps you a lot to be exposed to meet a lot of people, it might be easier to just go there. And so one example is the Sister Founders Club, which I think it's a lovely initiative here in Italy, because there is in general not so much buzz about entrepreneurship. If we then have a couple of examples of women, and ciao, even less. I mean, it's definitely not that easy. It's a very traditional society and very masculine society, very much in all the different angles. So that's why I truly believe it's a very nice statement to have that community. And this is one thing where you can directly go and you meet a lot of different female founders in Italy. And so you can exchange and you can meet. However, just that's why I'm mentioning that case, as I'm very conscious on with whom I connect and also where to spend my time on. The personal objectives behind the women that are behind that initiative, I doubt that they are so much aligned with my personal objectives. So that's why the type, even a little bit of what is the culture in which we share our things, are different from what I really like. So that's why, again, I have met a few of great female entrepreneurs through that initiative, but I also keep my personal distance. So my suggestions for Jenny would be, it depends in which city you are, but with hashtags, with Instagram, with LinkedIn, it's very easy to just have a look at it. And especially if you have no clue at all otherwise where to go there. And if there are 20 or 30 women or other entrepreneurs that might be interesting for you, you would definitely then find that person. And from that one on, there will be doors that are opening. And then actually you are already in the process in building up your personal network.
Beautiful. Then hashtags, LinkedIn, Instagram, just try to bond with any community possible, because I think if you really know your why, if you want to, then it shouldn't be a problem, right? Just like to go shoot them this email or a line, hey girls, I want to join you. And then you will never know, right, where this community or like even this small example will get you. Beautiful.
Yeah. Especially for minority groups, I mean, there are plenty of different communities. I mean, and especially I think in that way, it's something really you have a lot of different options where to go.
Yeah, 100%. Or maybe if they feel like I'm not a rookie in ventures, if I have something to offer to, I don't know, emerging countries, maybe then they should just go to NAMPELKA, check your cohorts, because the next one I know will be starting, so literally this month, November time, right? And then the next one, is it in January, if I recall it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I also put, the links to NAMPELKA page and everything, so people will check it out. Amazing. Alisa, thank you so much for this conversation. I really, really appreciate your time. And I wish you all the best with NAMPELKA and to connect as many enablers and growers together and make this world even better.